Mark chapter 3, verse 1. Jesus entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a shriveled hand. In order to accuse him, they were watching him closely to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath. He told the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand before us." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. After looking around at them with anger, he was grieved at the hardness of their hearts, and told the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. Immediately the Pharisees went out and started plotting with the Herodians against him, how they might kill him. Jesus is angered and grieved by the Pharisees' continual lack of compassion, and perhaps the greed that keeps them from accepting Jesus and letting go of their own power and influence. They weren't able to drop everything and follow Jesus like the disciples did. And the Pharisees working with the Herodians was incredibly ironic, because the Herodians were Jewish supporters of Herod. And accordingly, they would have supported Hellenism, or Greek influence in society. And this is the equivalent of extreme conservatives and liberals working together in our society, in our times, which we know doesn't happen very often. And so this is how bent they were on getting rid of Jesus, that just absolute enemies, right? Absolute political and cultural rivals would unite and work together, that they were willing to work together, shows just how just how serious they were, just how bent they were on getting rid of Jesus, just how much they hated him. Verse 7, Jesus departed with his disciples to the sea, and a large crowd followed from Galilee, and a large crowd followed from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, beyond the Jordan, and around Tyre and Sidon. The large crowd came to him because they heard about everything he was doing. Then he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him so that the crowd wouldn't crush him. Since he had healed many, all who had diseases were pressing toward him to touch him. Whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried, "You are the Son of God." And he would strongly warn them not to make him known. So many people from different areas, both Jews and Gentiles, were flocking to Jesus, bombarding him to the point where they feared they would get crushed by the crowds. So they go out on a boat to create some distance between themselves and the crowd. Why does Jesus not allow the evil spirits to reveal his true identity? I see here that Jesus clearly had a plan in mind, and he knew that his Father's will was not accomplished yet. Verse 13, Jesus went up the mountain and summoned those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, to be with him, to send them out to preach, and to have authority to drive out demons. He appointed the 12, to Simon he gave the name Peter, and to James the son of Zebedee, and to his brother John he gave the name Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. Jesus, he continues to put his plans into action, and he establishes the 12 disciples. But why 12? Is there significance with that number? From Jacob came the 12 sons that made up the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 12 tribes form the people of God. Jesus is now reforming the remnant of Jacob through these 12 disciples to establish God's everlasting kingdom. But in the way that Israel turned on itself and became divided, the 12 disciples would also have a weak link. Peter is listed first in all 4 of the Gospels when the disciples are listed, but Judas is always listed last. In Caesarea Philippi, Jesus foretells of Peter being the founding father of the church, which comes to pass in Acts, or we see at the Pentecost. But Judas, on the other hand, he had a very different legacy. Right? Judas is the Greek form of the name Judah. And Judah is the brother of Joseph, whose idea it was to sell Joseph for a sack of silver. Right? Judah, it was his idea to sell their brother for a sack of silver. And Judas is the only Judean of the group, and Jesus is also from the tribe of Judah. So Judas, who is the closest to Jesus by blood, turns on his own, right? Like someone like a brother to him for a sack of silver, much like Judah did in the Old Testament to his brother Joseph. And in the church today, much like the Israel of old, the church has turned against itself and suffers from many divisions. However, destruction is not our fate. We don't have this kind of hopelessness that we will just be left to our own destruction, because Jesus has promised to come back for us in his second coming to seal the deal, to finish what he started. Right? The remnant of Jacob carrying on through the church, living out the Abrahamic promise by spreading the gospel and making God's followers as numerous as the stars, will be rescued by Jesus before we ever taste a second death. Prayer points for this passage are: first, how does our culture oppose the culture of Jesus? And where do you stand in that opposition? Number two, do you place your hope and trust in Christ's return? Do you truly believe in his promises? How does the promise of his return bring comfort to your suffering here on earth?